Salut tout le monde! As I'm sure you all know by now, learning a language is not always smooth sailing. So that's why in today's video I want to share with you some of the most frustrating parts of the French language that I've encountered. Now as we're going through the video, I want you to be thinking about the struggles that you've faced, and then at the end, share them down below in the comments. Partly because it's just cathartic to get it off your chest, and also because you never know, someone may have encountered the same problem as you and have a really constructive way for how to combat them so you can move forward with your French. Mais si vous êtes prêts, c'est parti! Now the first thing I want to talk about is that word which looks very much like the English word don't, but has nothing to do with it, and it is what we call a relative pronoun. It is donc. Now hopefully you will very much understand my pain with this part of the language if you come from an English speaking background. I've wrestled with it a lot because unlike its sibling relative pronouns que and qui, this one means we have to start reordering our English phrases to turn them into French ones. You can quite easily say something like le resto or le restaurant que je connais. Le resto que je connais. Or you can say un sport qui me plaît, c'est le badminton. Le sport qui me plaît, c'est le badminton. They're relatively straightforward and they directly translate to phrases in English. But with donc is there to replace anything that comes after de in a phrase that requires it. For example, avoir besoin de, or avoir envie de, or even just parler de, because if you speak about something, you parle de quelque chose. So if you want to say, for example, the man I was talking about, or the man that I was talking about, in English you end the sentence with a preposition, in this case about. In French that's impossible, you can't do that, so you need to have a word to do that job for us, and in this case it's dont, so you say c'est l'homme dont je parle, c'est l'homme about which I'm speaking, or about whom I'm speaking, l'homme dont je parle. And for ages this blocked me because it's just not how we would construct it in English, and of course that's a bigger challenge. We're lucky with French because in a lot of ways it's so similar to English, but this is one key way where it differs, so we have to learn basically verbs like parler and constructions like avoir besoin de and avoir envie de all the time, that it just forces you to learn how to deal with it. But this first one really stopped me in my tracks and took me a long time to start using it effortlessly, and now if it's needed in constructions that I'm not so familiar with, I still have to stop and think and figure out how to structure the sentence. Now for number two, I'm sure I'm not alone in this one, it is the subjunctive tense. Now I found myself wanting to learn this, I think in hindsight, far too early, because it's this new shiny thing after you think you've grasped the past tenses and the future tenses. But really, until we're using the imparfait, passé composé interchangeably, correctly, and the same with the future tenses in daily conversation, we don't need to attack the subjunctive. The subjunctive is a huge topic on its own and it's best learned bit by bit. So my advice to my past self would be just to not worry about it until much later. And indeed, I did manage to do that, but not after already causing myself all sorts of headaches over when to use it, when not to. The truth is, the French will forgive you for using it when you shouldn't, and vice versa. Just like they do when you mess up by using the imparfait when you should use the passé composé. They're gonna understand you. And actually, as someone who self-studies, you probably already know quite a bit better French than the French do themselves. The third and final one, which I kind of decided early on but never really left my mind to put to one side, is inverted questions. Now, I'm sure you know what I mean. The most common inverted question that we hear from very young is parlez-vous français, or parlez-vous anglais, which is what you learn to ask when you come to France with little to no French. Parlez-vous anglais? It's the subject and the conjugation flipped around from statement form to form a question. Now this is quite simple, but I realised I was never really hearing this form, and instead I was learning about the qu'est-ce que or est-ce que form of questions, or the simple statement form with the upwards inflection towards the end to turn it into a question. even though I was quite a perfectionist, I realised that I really wasn't going to learn efficiently or have time to learn what was actually being used or what I would need to use in day-to-day conversation if I focused too heavily on all three forms of questions. It was something that just didn't stick in my head. There were often things of greater importance, like order of the elements in a sentence, because learning that was difficult enough, and then learning that the pronouns that replace objects go in a different place in the sentence to their counterparts in English. So learning that and then learning to use those in questions was hard enough. I didn't want to then have to learn to flip it and also keep pronouns in certain places in the sentence. So I just abandoned that. And so my tip to you there is, if one of your struggles is really something you can do without and still get by very comfortably, and in this case I feel like you can, because I very rarely, maybe it's because my brain has switched off to it now, but I very rarely hear this used in informal situations. It's always the statement form or the qu'est-ce que c'est form of a question. Voila. So, have you been thinking about your struggles that either you've overcome or that you're still facing issues with at the moment? Either way, put them down in the comments and hopefully we can start a discussion and either help people out or help you out by getting some answers to your problems. You never know what solutions someone else has come up with to enable them to move forward with their French. Self-study can be a lonely thing, but don't let it be, because it really isn't necessary. Whenever you need a hand, there are always people out there to help you out. Or as the French would say, te donner un coup de main. Okay, so this video was a little bit different, a little bit more of a personal touch to it, as I wanted to share with you some of my struggles with the language. There are many, many, many more, so perhaps I'll do a second edition of this one in the future, but I want to know what you guys think. So if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And of course guys, if you want to stay up to date with all my future content, please click on that big red subscribe button down below. But until the next time, merci de regarder. À la prochaine. Ciao.